There's a stretch of river in the Amazon where a 5-meter shape drifts just under the surface, and from above it looks exactly like a floating log. People have reached out to push that log out of the way. That was the last decision they made. The Amazon doesn't warn you about its predators. The most dangerous things here are the ones you never see. The spider that doesn't build a web because it would rather come find you. The snake that strikes faster than your eye can follow. The fish that drops 800 volts into the water and lets you drown on your own. This isn't a place with a few dangerous animals living in it. It's a place built almost entirely out of them. And every single animal on this list can go from invisible to lethal in about the time it took you to read this far. Before we go in, do me a favor. Tell me what time it is where you are right now, and what part of the world you're watching this from. Jaguar. Every other big cat on the planet hunts the same way. They go for the throat. They clamp down on the windpipe and they wait, sometimes for several minutes, until the animal underneath them stops struggling. It's slow. It's a wrestling match. The jaguar, Panthera onca, doesn't do any of that. The jaguar walks up behind its target, opens its jaws, and bites straight through the back of the skull. Not the neck, the skull. The canine teeth punch through bone and into the brain, and the fight is over before the animal even understands a fight has started. One bite. That's the whole strategy. To understand why a jaguar can do something no other cat can do, you have to understand what's going on inside its head, literally. Pound for pound, the jaguar has the strongest bite of any cat in the world. A lion is bigger. A tiger is heavier. Neither of them bites like this. The jaguar's jaw muscles are oversized for its body, and they're built for one job, driving those teeth through whatever's in the way. And in the Amazon, what's usually in the way is armor. This is the part that stops people. A jaguar's normal menu includes animals that evolved specifically to not be eaten. River turtles with shells like dinner plates. Caimans wrapped in bony plates under the skin. Tortoises built like helmets with legs. None of it works. The jaguar bites down and the shell gives way like a plastic cup. There's footage of jaguars cracking into turtles the way you'd crack into a pistachio. Casually, almost bored, because for this animal, the armor was never really armor. It was just packaging, and here's the detail people get wrong about jaguars. We picture a cat that's afraid of water. The jaguar isn't. It's one of the few cats on Earth that actively likes the water and hunts in it. It swims across rivers. It pulls caimans out of the shallows. It will drop off a low branch directly onto something passing underneath. So the mental image of a safe boundary, the water's edge, the riverbank, the idea that you're fine as long as you stay near the canoe, doesn't apply here. There's no line the jaguar won't cross. The people who actually live in the forest understand this better than any of us. Along the rivers, in the indigenous and riverside communities, the jaguar isn't treated like an animal. It's treated like a presence. There's a whole belief built around a figure they sometimes call the shaman jaguar, a person who can cross over into the body of the cat and move through the forest as one of them, settling scores with anyone who damages the land. And there's a quieter habit that tells you everything. People avoid saying the animal's name out loud in the forest at night. Not because they think the word is magic, because they've decided it's better not to call attention. When the people who know the forest best would rather not even speak of something after dark. That's not superstition doing the talking. That's experience. The jaguar is the top of the food chain here, and it earned the spot with one bite that ends the encounter before it begins. But it's not the thing in this forest that's harmed the most people. Not even close. The animal that's done that is sitting in the water, and from the surface it looks like firewood. Black caiman. A caiman doesn't chase. That's the first thing to understand about it, and it's the reason it's so dangerous. The black caiman, Melanosuchus niger, is the largest predator in the Amazon basin, and individuals have been measured at over 5 meters, longer than a car. Something that size you'd think you'd notice. You don't. Because the black caiman has turned doing absolutely nothing into a hunting technique. It floats. It lets the current carry it perfectly still, with just the top of its head and back breaking the surface, and the dark, almost matte skin that gives it its name soaks up the light until the whole shape reads as a waterlogged log drifting downstream. People have genuinely mistaken them for debris. The reason this works so well comes down to a piece of design on the animal's face. Its eyes and nostrils sit right on the top of the skull, raised slightly above everything else. So the caiman can hang in the water with 99% of its body submerged and invisible, and still see the entire riverbank and breathe the whole time. It's watching you. You're looking at a log, and then there's no log. When something steps into the shallows to drink, or wades a little too close to the edge, the stillness becomes an explosion measured in milliseconds. There is no warm-up, no tell, no moment where you see it coming. The caiman clamps on, throws its entire body weight backward, and drags whatever it caught off the bank and into the river, its home field, where nothing can fight back. Then it spins. It rolls its whole body over and over along its long axis fast, and that spin is what does the work. It's how the caiman handles anything too big to swallow whole. What happens after is almost worse in a quiet way. The black caiman's stomach is one of the most aggressive in the animal kingdom. Its digestive acids are strong enough to dissolve bone, hooves, shell, horn, the parts that nothing else can break down. Whatever goes in doesn't come back out. And the people who fish these rivers know exactly which stretches belong to a big Atsu, and they will not put a hand in the water there, full stop. There are old stories up and down the Amazon about enormous caimans, centuries old, that guard treasure on the riverbed or swallow whole canoes, and you can roll your eyes at the treasure part, but the part underneath the story is real. There are stretches of river where the locals simply do not go in. They didn't make that rule for fun, so now you've got the cat that owns the land and the reptile that owns the water, which leaves one question. What owns the space in between? The flooded forest? The shallow margins? The place that's neither solid ground nor open river? Something does. And it doesn't have venom, and it doesn't have a bite that ends anything. It doesn't need either one. Green anaconda. It's the heaviest snake in the world. Not the longest. That title gets argued over with a python on the other side of the planet. But the heaviest, by a wide margin, and weight, is the entire point with this animal. A large green anaconda, Eunectes marinus, can weigh as much as a grown person, and almost all of that weight is muscle wrapped around a single simple idea. It doesn't bite to finish anything. It bites to hold on, and then it does the rest with its body. The anaconda hunts the way the caiman does, from ambush, mostly in the water or right at the muddy edge of it, where its size disappears into the murk. When something comes within range, it strikes and grabs. And the first thing you notice about its mouth is that the teeth curve backward, angled toward the throat like a row of fish hooks. They're not for tearing. They're for the one thing that matters in that first second, making sure that whatever the snake has grabbed cannot pull away. Every direction the animal struggles, the teeth dig in deeper. The harder it fights, the more stuck it gets, and while it's stuck, the coils come around. This is where the anaconda does something genuinely clever and a little unsettling once you understand it. People think a constrictor crushes things, squeezes until something breaks. That's not really it. The anaconda reads its prey. Every time the animal breathes out, the snake takes up the slack and tightens, just a little. The chest gets smaller, so the next breath is shallower. Then it breathes out again, and the snake tightens again. The loop only runs one direction. Within a shockingly short span, the pressure isn't just on the lungs, it's on the entire circulatory system, cutting the flow that keeps everything running, and the larger bones simply can't hold against that kind of force. It is one of the most efficient processes in nature, and it happens in near silence, in the water, where you wouldn't see any of it from above. Then comes the part that doesn't seem like it should be physically possible. The anaconda's jaw isn't a single fused piece like ours. The bones are connected by stretchy ligaments, so the whole front of the head can spread open far wider than the snake's own body. That's how an animal you could wrap your arms around swallows a capybara, a rodent the size of a large dog, or a full-grown deer, something up to 3 times wider than the snake itself. It takes hours, and for those hours, the anaconda is a different shape than it was that morning. It should come as no surprise that this is the animal sitting underneath the oldest and biggest legend in the entire Amazon. The boyuna, the great snake, the cobra grande. The story goes that one of these grows and grows until the rivers can't hold it anymore, and it slips underneath the land itself and keeps living there, beneath the towns, beneath the riverbanks. And when it shifts its weight, the ground moves. The banks give way and slide into the river. Those sudden collapses of earth the locals call fallen land, real events that really happen along these rivers every year. People watched the ground drop into the water, needed a reason, and the reason they reached for was a snake too big to see all at once. Stand next to a 5-meter anaconda, watch it work, and the story stops sounding like a story. 3 animals in: the cat that bites through bone, the log that isn't a log, and the muscle that reads your breathing. And we haven't left the largest, slowest predators yet, the ones you might at least have a chance of spotting. The forest's real specialty is the things you don't. Starting with the one that comes out of the canopy at 80 kilometers an hour without making a sound. Harpy eagle, 400 kilograms. That's the pressure that comes down when a harpy eagle, harpia, closes its feet on something. To put that in a shape you can hold, it's roughly the squeezing force of a large dog's full body weight, focused down into talons longer than the claws of a grizzly bear. Not the eagle's body weight, just the grip. Those rear talons measure around 12 to 13 centimeters, about the length of an adult human finger, and they're the actual hunting tool. The harpy doesn't really attack with its beak. It attacks with its feet, and the feet are built to do one thing on contact: drive through. This is the most powerful bird of prey in the world, and almost nobody who lives under it ever sees it move. A female can stand close to 1 meter tall with a wingspan around 2 meters, and she carries all of that through the tightest part of the rainforest. Not above the canopy where you'd expect an eagle, but inside it, threading between trunks and branches at speeds approaching 80 kilometers an hour, and she does it without sound. The wing feathers are shaped to move air without the rush you'd normally hear, so the first sign that a harpy is in the area is usually the same instant it arrives. For a monkey sitting in a tree, the sequence is nothing, 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 finished. The grip closes on the back of the neck on impact, and the bones give at once. There's no chase through the branches. There's no second attempt needed. What makes that even possible is something on the bird's face you might mistake for decoration. The harpy has a ruff of feathers around its head that it can raise into a disc, and that disc isn't for show. It works like a satellite dish, catching sound and funneling it toward the ears. The hearing it produces is precise enough that the eagle can sit motionless in the canopy and locate prey by sound alone. The specific rustle of a sloth shifting its weight, the particular movement of leaves that means a monkey and not a breeze. It hunts with its ears, lines up the shot, and then crosses the gap in silence. Sloths and monkeys make up most of its diet, and a sloth never finds out what happened to it. For a lot of indigenous peoples in the Amazon, the harpy sits in a category above ordinary animals. Some speak of it as a guardian spirit of the high places, a thing that belongs to the sky and only visits the world below. Its feathers carry into sacred ceremonies, into the rituals that mark a young person becoming an adult, passed along to hand down strength and steadiness to the next set of hands. Which makes a strange kind of sense. When you live underneath a thing that can drop out of the canopy without a sound and end an encounter on first contact, you don't file it under birds. You give it a different place entirely. That's the danger from above. Fast, total, gone before it registered. Now lower your eyes to the ground, because the forest floor runs on the exact opposite principle. Up there, the threat was speed. Down here, it's that you'll step on something that was counting on you not to see it. Common lancehead. Here's a number that reorganizes how you think about walking in the Amazon. Of every serious snake encounter in the region, every emergency, every rush to get someone to a clinic, more than 80% trace back to a single animal. Not the giant constrictor, not the 4-meter monster we'll get to in a minute. It's a snake most people have never heard of, rarely more than 1.5 meters long, lying in the dead leaves. The common lancehead, Bothrops atrox, known across the region as the jararaca. The reason it's responsible for so much harm has nothing to do with aggression and everything to do with the fact that you will never see it. Its coloring is dead leaf brown and gray, broken up into patterns that match the litter on the forest floor exactly, and it doesn't flee when something approaches. It holds still and trusts the camouflage, which works flawlessly right up until a foot comes down. And the lancehead is built to hit a target it can't even see. On each side of its face, between the eye and the nostril, there's a small pit, a heat-sensing organ so sensitive it reads the body warmth of a nearby animal as a thermal image. It doesn't need light. It doesn't need to watch you coming. It feels the heat of a leg in the dark and lines up on it. The strike itself is faster than your eye can follow. There's no rear up, no warning posture you'd have time to react to. Just a blur, and then it's back in the leaves looking like leaves again. And what it leaves behind in the body works differently from what most people picture when they think venom. This isn't a clean nerve toxin that switches something off. It's a tissue-destroying venom, and it goes to work on the body's plumbing immediately. It breaks down blood vessels from the inside. And within a frighteningly short window, the body starts losing the ability to hold itself together. The gums begin to seep. Old healed overcuts open back up. The wound itself won't stop. The tissue around the bite begins to break down. It is not subtle and it is not slow. The people who live far from any clinic have built a whole layer of defense around this snake. Strong prayers. Home remedies brewed from forest plants and cane liquor. The specifics passed down for exactly this emergency. And here's the part that matters. They use them, and at the same time they know completely that the only thing that actually reverses it is anti-venom from a hospital. They hold both ideas at once. The remedy is for the hours on the river you have to survive before you reach the help that works. That's not ignorance. That's a culture that has counted its losses to this one quiet animal and built around the gap. They call it the great silent danger of the forest floor, and the 80% number says they named it correctly. The lancehead does most of the damage through sheer numbers, a small snake you meet by accident. But it has a relative deeper in the forest that flips every one of those traits. Bigger, rarer, patient in a way that's hard to wrap your head around. And when it commits, it doesn't ration anything. Bushmaster, find a giant tree. Look at the tangle of roots and buttresses at its base, and understand that something might have been coiled there, motionless, for weeks. The Bushmaster, Lachesis muta, the surucucu, is the largest venomous snake in the Americas, reaching close to 4 meters, and its entire way of life is an exercise in waiting longer than any animal should reasonably wait. It picks a spot along a route that small animals use, settles into it, and then essentially becomes part of the scenery for as long as it takes. Days, weeks. It is in no hurry whatsoever. Time is the one resource the forest has in surplus, and the Bushmaster spends it freely. That patience is exactly what makes it so dangerous to a person, because there's no movement to catch your eye and no reason to expect something that large to be sitting that still. The name people use for it in the region, Pico de Jaca, comes from its scales, which turn upward and roughen the skin into a texture like the rind of a jackfruit, breaking up its outline against the bark and leaf litter until the snake reads as more dead wood at the foot of the tree. You can be very close before anything tells you it's there. And when a Bushmaster commits to a strike, The contrast with the lancehead is the whole story. The lancehead is a small snake making the most of a small amount of venom. The bushmaster has no such limit. It delivers an enormous load in a single strike, far more than it needs for the small animals it usually waits for. And on a human body, that volume hits like a system overload, the kind of full-body reaction that sends the whole thing into shock, with blood pressure dropping out from under the person, and the heart struggling to keep its rhythm. It's not the slow tissue breakdown of its smaller cousin. It's a flood. Naturally, an animal this large and this hidden collects stories. There's a persistent one that the surucucu slips up to nursing mothers in the night and drinks their milk while they sleep. There's another that it can hold a victim still with its stare before it strikes. Neither holds up, but you can see exactly where they come from. Both are attempts to explain how something 4 meters long gets that close without anyone noticing. And it must have some power over us is an easier answer than the real one, which is that it simply outweighted everybody. The hunters have a different read on it. They say crossing paths with a bushmaster in the forest is a sign that this stretch of ground belongs to the mother of the forest, and you are passing through somewhere that was never yours. The lancehead and the bushmaster between them account for the overwhelming majority of the forest's harm done by tooth and venom. 1 through numbers, 1 through volume. Roughly 9 out of 10 of those emergencies come down to these two animals and the family they belong to. And every one of those happened on dry land. We haven't even gotten back in the water yet, where the rules get stranger, and the thing that ends you might not bother to touch you at all. Black piranha. Let's clear something up first, because the movie's got the piranha exactly backwards. A piranha is not a torpedo that strips a cow to the bone in 30 seconds while the water boils. Most of the time, piranhas are nervous, scattered fish that would rather avoid you. The reputation is mostly myth. And then there's the black piranha, Sarasalmus rhombeus, which goes ahead and earns the whole reputation by itself. Pound for pound. This fish delivers one of the most powerful bites ever measured in any bony fish alive today. Scientists have actually clamped force meters onto these animals. And the numbers that come back are absurd for something that fits in 2 hands. A bite force many times the fish's own body weight, driven by jaw muscles that take up a huge share of its head. The teeth are short, triangular and interlocking, top row fitting into bottom row, and they don't really puncture so much as shear. One bite closes like a pair of guillotine blades and takes a clean piece out of whatever it shut on. The teeth are where it gets strange, though. A piranha can't afford a dull blade, so it doesn't wear them down one at a time the way we do. It replaces them in blocks. A whole quarter of the jaw drops out together and a fresh set rotates up underneath. So one side is always sharp and ready while the other regrows. The fish is never unarmed. Now, one black piranha is a problem the size of your hand. The thing the local people actually respect is the math when there are hundreds of them and the water is low. In the dry season, the rivers shrink and pull back, and shoals of piranhas get trapped in stranded pools that are drying out and running short of food. Hungry, crowded, and keyed to the scent of blood in the water, that's a different animal than the shy fish of the wet season. The locals have a word for these stretches and a season for avoiding them, and the rule is simple. You do not wade into a shrinking dry season pool with an open cut. Not because one fish will get you, because the pool has stopped being water with fish in it and become something closer to a single organism with a few hundred sets of blades. But a shoal of piranhas at least has to reach you and bite. The next animal in the river skips that entire step. It can finish the encounter without ever making contact, and it does it with electricity. Electric eel, 860 volts. That's the figure that comes up for the strongest jolt an electric eel, Electrophorus electricus, can put into the water. And it's worth sitting with that number for a second, because a wall socket in most homes runs a fraction of it. The eel, which, despite the name, is actually a kind of knife fish, not an eel at all, generates and stores the charge in its own body. And it does it without harming itself, which on its own is one of the stranger tricks in the animal kingdom. It works because roughly 80% of this animal is battery. 3 specialized electric organs run most of the length of its body, stacked with thousands of cells that each hold a tiny charge, wired in series the way you'd line up batteries in a flashlight, so that all those small voltages add up into one massive discharge. Day to day, the eel doesn't even use the big charge. It puts out gentle, low-voltage pulses and reads how they bounce back, building a picture of the muddy, near-black water around it the way a ship uses sonar. It's navigating and finding prey by electricity long before it ever fires the main weapon. And when it does fire, it doesn't need to bite, wrap, or hold. The discharge floods the water and seizes up the muscles of anything nearby. For the small fish it eats, that's instant. They stiffen and the eel takes them at its leisure. For something the size of a horse, the jolt is enough to knock it flat. For a person standing in the shallows, the danger isn't really the shock as an injury. It's that the muscles lock, the body stops doing what the brain tells it, and a person who can't make their arms and legs work is a person who can't keep their head above the water. The eel never had to touch them. The river does the rest. There's one more oddity that makes it feel almost designed by committee. This electric powerhouse can't breathe properly underwater. Its gills are poorly developed, so it has to rise to the surface and gulp air roughly every 10 minutes, or it runs out, meaning the most electric animal in the river is also tied to the surface like something on a leash. The old fishermen had their own relationship with it. They'd say it dries up the legs of anyone who waded too close, and some of them genuinely believed that brushing a smaller one on purpose could pull the ache out of stiff joints and sore muscles. A rough, homemade version of an electric shock treatment, delivered by a fish. So far, the river's dangers have been built into single animals. One bite, one charge. The next predator is dangerous because there are 20 of them. They're related, and they've worked out how to do this together. Giant otter. The fishermen have a name for them that tells you where they rank: the water jaguars. Giant otters, Pteronura brasiliensis, are the largest otters on Earth, reaching nearly 2 meters from nose to tail. And if your image of an otter is a small, charming thing cracking shellfish on its belly, this is going to require an adjustment. These hunt in family groups of up to 20, and they don't just hunt together. They run coordinated, organized operations in the water, surrounding and corralling prey with the kind of teamwork you'd expect from a wolf pack, except faster and in their own element. What lifts them out of the cute river mammal category entirely is their nerve. A group of giant otters will take on and overpower animals that everything else in the river goes out of its way to avoid. They've been documented driving off and overpowering caimans. They will stand up to anacondas, not as a desperate last resort, as a matter of defending the family stretch of water and the fish in it. Pound for pound, there are few animals in the Amazon more willing to escalate, and they do it as a unit, which is the part that actually matters. The coordination runs on sound. Giant otters have one of the most complex vocal systems of any mammal in the region. Researchers have cataloged more than 20 distinct calls, a working vocabulary for danger in the water, intruder on the bank, close in, fall back. When a group locks onto a target, they're not just swimming at it. They're talking the whole time, adjusting, surrounding, cutting off the exits. And a coordinated group is a fundamentally different threat than 20 individuals would be. It's a single hunting intelligence spread across 20 bodies. So the fishermen give their territory a wide berth, and they don't pretend otherwise. There are accounts up and down these rivers of giant otter groups surrounding and tipping over small canoes when someone got too close to their fish or their young. A family of them rising around a boat all at once. Whether every story holds up exactly, the underlying lesson is one the locals absorbed long ago. This is not an animal you crowd. You let the water jaguars have their water. Everything in this river so far has been about size or charge or numbers, things you can at least see coming and steer around. The last animal in the water is the one the local men fear more than the piranha, more than the caiman, more than any of it. And it's almost too small to see. Candiru. It's barely the length of a toothpick and nearly see-through. The candiru, Vandalia cirrhosa, is a tiny, translucent catfish. And in a river that contains 5-meter caimans and the heaviest snake on the planet. This is the animal that the men who've spent their whole lives on these waters are most careful about. That ranking is not a mistake, and once you understand how the candiru makes its living, it stops being surprising. The candiru is a parasite and a specialist. Its normal way of feeding is to find a larger fish, slip in under the gill covers where the soft tissue is, and feed on the blood there. It locates its host by chemistry. It reads the faint plume of waste, the trace of ammonia and urea that a fish's gills push out into the water, and follows that chemical trail straight to the source. That's the whole system. Detect the flow, swim up it, lock on. For thousands of years that worked perfectly and had nothing to do with people. The problem is that a human body in the water can put out a similar chemical signal. And so the deep, specific dread attached to this fish, the reason it outranks every larger animal in the river in the minds of the local men, is the possibility that the candiru mistakes that signal for a host and follows it up into the body, where it doesn't belong and can't easily be removed. It carries small spines near its head that flare out and lodge it in place, and once it's anchored, it isn't coming back out on its own. The result is a medical emergency that historically meant surgery, immediate and unpleasant, and it accounts for a fear that runs deeper than anything the piranhas inspire. Which is why there is one rule on the Amazon treated as absolute, more ironclad than any warning about the big predators. You do not relieve yourself in the river. Not once, not ever, no exceptions. The chemical trail is the lure, so you never provide it. Generations of people have crossed certain stretches of water with that single instruction drilled in harder than anything about caimans or anacondas, and some have worn tight coverings or improvised guards over the body as protection in waters known to hold them. Think about what that means. In a river that holds a predator the size of a car and a snake you could wrap your arms around. The thing they actually organize their behavior around, the rule passed to every child before they're old enough to swim, is a fish you could lose between your fingers. That's the river. The land had things that could end an encounter in one bite. The water has things that don't even need to touch you, and one that's most frightening precisely because it's so small, which leaves the part of the forest where the danger isn't size or speed at all. It's the thing small enough to share your boot, your bedding, the bark you put your hand on, and what they're carrying. Brazilian wandering spider. Most spiders are running a real estate business. They build a web, they wait at home, and they hope something wanders in. The Brazilian wandering spider doesn't own property. The genus is Phonutria, and the local name, Armadilha, comes from what it does when it's cornered. But the reason it's on this list is what it does the rest of the time. It doesn't sit and wait for food to arrive. It comes down to the forest floor at night and goes looking. It's a hunter that walks, and it walks toward things. The name Armadilha describes the posture, and it's worth picturing, because it's the warning you get, and it's not much of one. When this spider feels trapped, it rears up on its back legs, lifts its front pair high into the air, and holds there. A small, deliberate, almost theatrical stance that means it has decided to stop retreating. And from that pose it can launch. We're talking about a spider that can throw itself something like 40 centimeters toward whatever's threatening it. It does not have the option of running being its only plan. It has a forward gear. Its venom is a nerve toxin, and the experience of it is, by every account, an extraordinary amount of pain almost immediately, followed by the body's signaling system getting scrambled and left alone, that can build toward the muscles that run breathing and the heartbeat losing their thread. But the detail that made this spider internationally famous is a stranger one, and it's the kind of thing that sounds invented until you check it. In male patients, the venom can trigger a specific, long-lasting, and genuinely painful medical reaction downstairs. The toxins set off a flood of nitric oxide in the body, which is, as it happens, the exact chemical pathway certain well-known little blue pills are designed to nudge. The result has sent men to the emergency room embarrassed and in real distress. And it has also sent researchers into the lab, because a venom that does that on purpose is a venom worth understanding. Around the region, it picks up a couple of nicknames. One is the banana spider, because it likes to tuck itself into bunches of fruit near houses, which is exactly how it ends up traveling occasionally, much farther from the Amazon than it ever intended. The forest hands have a blunter description. They say it has the devil in its body, on account of a temper that doesn't quit. It's the rare spider that, cornered, picks up its hands and squares off. Most of the things on this list are dangerous because they hide. This one is dangerous because it doesn't back down. The wandering spider at least has to reach you to be a problem. The next animal is so far past that requirement it's almost philosophical. It can finish you without doing anything. You're the one who has to make the move. Poison dart frog, 1 microgram. That's roughly the amount of toxin it takes to end an adult human, and it's an amount you cannot really see. A speck, a fraction of a grain of salt. That's the figure attached to the golden poison frog and its relatives in the family Dendrobatidae. And the gap between the size of this animal and the size of its threat is the entire reason it's here. The frog is about the size of a coin. A single one carries enough on its skin to bring down something like 10 grown adults. There is no animal on this list with a more lopsided ratio of body to danger. It doesn't hunt anybody. Let's be clear about that. It eats tiny insects and goes about its day. The toxin lives on its skin, a substance called batrachotoxin, and it doesn't need to bite or strike to deliver it. Contact is the whole mechanism. The toxin works by jamming the nerves open. It locks the channels that nerves use to fire, so the signals that tell muscles when to contract and when to release never switch off. And the heart, which is a muscle that depends entirely on that rhythm, loses the ability to keep time. It can happen in well under 10 minutes, and the frog isn't hiding any of this. The bright colors, the gold, the blue, the warning label reds, are an advertisement. The frog wants to be seen. It's the one animal out here that's safer to look at than most, precisely because it's telling the truth about itself. Indigenous peoples worked this out long before any of it had a name, and they turned it into the most efficient hunting tool in the forest. They'd touch the tips of their blowgun darts to the frog's back, and a dart prepared that way would bring down prey high in the canopy that an ordinary dart would only annoy. That's where the name dart frog comes from. Not from the frog, from what the frog made possible. To the people who used it, it was treated as a kind of lethal guardian, something you handled with enormous care and otherwise left completely alone. But here's the twist that I think is the best fact about this animal, and it reframes the whole thing. The frog doesn't make the toxin. It can't. It assembles it out of its diet. Specific ants and beetles it eats in the wild, the raw ingredients its body refines into the finished product. Take that diet away, and the recipe falls apart. Raise one of these frogs in captivity on ordinary crickets, and it grows up completely harmless. Same frog, same bright colors, same everything, and you could hold it in your bare hand all afternoon. The deadliest skin in the Amazon is, in the end, a matter of what the thing had for lunch. That was a toxin you have to walk into. The next one comes looking for the warm, dark, enclosed spaces around a sleeping person. And there's a very specific morning habit that exists entirely because of it. Amazonian black scorpion. Before you put your boots on in the Amazon, you bang them out hard, heel down, slam them against the ground a few times, every single morning, no exceptions. And the rubber tappers and nut gatherers who work these forests treat this the way you'd treat checking a stove is off. The reason has a name: Titius obscurus, the Amazonian black scorpion, the most dangerous scorpion in the north of Brazil. It hunts from ambush at night, tucked into fallen logs and dense vegetation, and it has a deep fondness for crawling into dark, snug enclosures and going still. A boot left out overnight is, from a scorpion's point of view, a perfect bedroom. Its venom is a serious nerve toxin, and on a human it doesn't waste time. Within minutes there can be muscle spasms, a heartbeat that loses its steady rhythm, and in the worst cases, fluid building in the lungs that makes breathing its own emergency. For a small child or anyone already vulnerable, that's a genuine race against the clock. And out here the clock is often measured in how far you are from a clinic, which can be a long way. What makes this particular scorpion stand out from its relatives is that it broke the rules of its own kind. Scorpions are supposed to be desert animals, dry climate specialists, the icon of arid places. This one looked at the wettest forest on the planet and moved in anyway, fully at home in the heat and the humidity, and it didn't stop at ground level. It climbs. It will go up into tall trees to hunt, which quietly removes another assumption you might lean on: the idea that danger lives down low and up is safe. So the boot banging makes complete sense. And it's a good example of something this whole list keeps circling back to. The most useful knowledge in the Amazon isn't dramatic. It's a small, boring, unbreakable habit, repeated every morning, that exists because enough people skipped it once. The locals call this scorpion a treacherous thing, and the boots get checked, and life goes on. The scorpion at least carries a weapon you can point to: a stinger, a tail, an obvious threat. The last animal in this stretch doesn't threaten anything. It just sits there, and it's one of the most poisonous things you could ever pick up. Cane toad. The cane toad, Rhinella marina, is, on the surface, the least menacing animal we've talked about. It's a big, lumpy, slow toad. It doesn't run, doesn't strike, doesn't chase. Its idea of hunting is to sit there and swallow whatever wanders past. Insects, small rodents, other frogs, alive and whole with a flick of a sticky tongue. If everything on this list were judged on attitude, the cane toad would finish last. It has none. It doesn't need any. The danger is purely defensive, and it's loaded into two glands, sitting behind its eyes. The big parotoid glands, swollen-looking sacs that hold a milky toxin called bufotoxin. Press on the toad, bite it, try to pick it up wrong, and it weeps that fluid out. If it gets into the eyes or the mouth of whatever's bothering it, a predator, a curious dog, a person who didn't know better, it goes after the heart, and it can stop a small animal's heart in minutes. The toad spends zero effort on a fence and routes the entire budget into being genuinely hazardous to touch. And it doesn't stop at the adult. The eggs are toxic. The tadpoles are toxic. A pond where they've concentrated can take out an animal that simply drinks from the wrong puddle. It is poisonous at every single stage of its life, including the parts that are basically commas with tails. Naturally, an animal that's harmless to look at and quietly lethal to handle ends up wrapped in the darker corners of local folklore. The toad turns up all through the region's stories about curses and bad work, the kind of thing meant to make an enemy wither. You can see the logic. It's the perfect symbol for it, something that sits still, asks for nothing, and ruins anything that puts its mouth on it. And here's the thing about the cane toad that I find almost funny, in a flat sort of way. It is staggeringly successful. Slow, fat, no weapons, no speed, no plan. And it has spread to warm regions around the world and thrived in every one of them. Largely because the local predators keep doing the one thing they shouldn't, generation after generation. The toad never adapted to win. It just sat there being a bad idea to eat, and let everything else figure that out the hard way, one mouthful at a time. It's the rare animal on this list whose entire survival strategy is to do absolutely nothing and be deeply regretted. That's the chemistry department of the Amazon. Toxins you walk into, touch, or pick up. The next set doesn't deal in poison you can avoid by being careful. It deals in pure sensation delivered on purpose by things that will come to you. And one of them produces what is, by measurement, the worst pain a small creature can hand a human being: bullet ant. There is a scale that scientists use to rank insect stings. It was built by a researcher who got stung by basically everything on purpose over the course of his career and wrote down, in careful and occasionally poetic detail, exactly how each one felt. It runs from 1 to 4. Most stings you'll ever feel sit down at the bottom. The bullet ant, Paraponera clavata, sits at the very top, a 4+, the ceiling, the worst score the scale has to offer. The English name is not a metaphor. People who've been on the receiving end and have unfortunately also been shot say the comparison is fair. It feels like taking a bullet. The ant itself is large as ants go, up to a couple of centimeters, and it lives at the base of trees. And in its day-to-day, it's just a hunter of small forest creatures going about an ordinary insect life. It has no interest in people. The trouble starts only if the nest is threatened. And then the colony defends itself. And the weapon it defends itself with is a toxin called ponerotoxin, delivered through the sting. What that toxin does is hijack the nerves directly, jamming them open so they fire and won't stop, which the body experiences as pure, unfiltered pain with no off switch. And it doesn't fade in the polite way a wasp sting fades. It rolls on in waves for up to 24 hours, a full day and night of it, often with the shakes and a fever riding along on top. One sting, 24 hours. Now hold that fact next to what some people choose to do with it. The Sadere Mawe, an indigenous people of the Amazon, have built one of the most demanding rites of passage on earth around this exact ant. To be recognized as a man, a young person has to put on a pair of woven gloves. And the gloves have been filled with bullet ants, dozens of them, stingers turned inward. He puts his hands inside, and then he has to keep them there and hold steady and not cry out for around 10 minutes while the colony does what a threatened colony does. And it's not a one-time thing. To complete the passage fully, he does it again and again, across many ceremonies. Some say a couple dozen times over the years. They volunteer for the worst pain cataloged by science, repeatedly, on purpose, as proof that they can stand it. There's a kind of nerve in that which is honestly hard to wrap your head around. The ant gives no quarter. Neither do they. The bullet ant earns its place through one perfect sting. The next animal is a predator in the full sense, something that actively hunts down other creatures. And it has dozens of legs and a pair of weapons most people don't even know it has. Giant centipede. Picture something longer than your forearm, flattened, fast, and made of armored segments, pouring across the forest floor, and then reconsider where you'd assume the safe zones were. The Amazonian giant centipede, Scolopendra gigantea, can pass 30 centimeters in length, and it is not a passive thing waiting to be stepped on. It is an active, aggressive predator that runs down lizards, mice, frogs, and is more than capable of handling animals far larger than you'd expect something boneless and the width of a finger to take on. The way it does it is the first surprise. Those dozens of legs aren't just for moving, they're for holding. The centipede throws its body around prey and pins it down with rows of legs along both sides, wrapping it up so there's nowhere to go. And then it uses a weapon that isn't even in its mouth. On the very first body segment, just behind the head, it has a pair of modified legs that have, over time, turned into curved, hollow fangs, called forcipules, loaded with venom. It drives those in and delivers a toxin that breaks down tissue and, in small prey, stops the heart fast. On a person, it isn't usually fatal, but not usually fatal undersells it. It's severe, body-rattling pain with serious swelling and a high fever to keep it company. This is not a bite you shrug off. And then there's the trick that should not be allowed. The giant centipede has been documented hunting bats, animals that fly in the dark that the centipede has no business reaching. It solves the problem by climbing the wall of a cave, going all the way up to the ceiling, and then anchoring itself by just its rear legs, letting the entire front of its long body hang down free into the open air. It dangles there in the dark, holding on by a few back legs, and waits for bats to fly past, and snatches them clean out of their flight path in midair. Take a second with that image because it rearranges your sense of where a thing like this can and can't be. It is not confined to the floor. It is not confined to surfaces at all. It can be hanging from the roof of a cave, fishing bats out of the sky. The forest hands talk about this animal the way you'd talk about something that leaves a mark. They say where the centipede walks, it leaves a trail of fire. And there's an old belief that if one crosses the skin of a sleeping person, its many feet can raise burns that won't heal, especially if the person startles awake and panics. The folklore is doing the same thing folklore always does here, taking a real specific danger and dressing it in something memorable enough that nobody forgets to be careful. You don't need the burning footprints part to be true. You need to remember not to grab the log without looking. The story makes sure you do. The centipede is a versatile predator that will eat nearly anything it can pin. The last animal in this stretch is the opposite, a complete specialist locked onto a single target. And what it does to that target is the strangest piece of natural engineering on the entire list. Tarantula hawk wasp. The local name translates to something like the devil's horse, and people don't hand out a name like that for nothing. The tarantula hawk wasp, genus Pepses, is a large, dark, long-legged wasp with one job that organizes its whole existence. And the job is going after giant tarantulas, spiders many times its own size, armored, fanged, and entirely capable of handling most things that come at them. The wasp comes at them anyway, on purpose. As a career, the encounter is an aerial duel, and it's a genuine fight. The wasp has to get past a tarantula that is fully aware of what's happening and trying to defend itself with fangs that mean business. It dodges, it circles, it works the angles, and then it lands the one strike that matters, driving its long stinger into exactly the right spot to reach the spider's nervous system. And the spider doesn't end. That's the crucial detail, and it's where this goes somewhere unsettling. The sting doesn't finish the tarantula. It paralyzes it. Switches off its ability to move while leaving everything else running. The spider is still alive. It just can't do anything anymore. For a person, by the way. That same sting is rated right up near the bullet ant on the pain scale, among the most intense stings a human can experience. The kind that drops people where they stand and, by the honest advice of people who study these things, isn't worth resisting. The standard recommendation if one gets you is, more or less, to lie down and let it pass, because there's nothing productive you can do for the few minutes it owns you. The forest people put it more plainly. They say the pain makes a person call out for the devil. If you see one flying low and hear that heavy droning, the old habit is to get down on the ground and hold still. But the paralyzed spider is where the real story is, and it's not for the squeamish. So here it is straight. The wasp drags the living, motionless tarantula back to a burrow it has prepared. It lays a single egg on the spider's body. Then it seals the spider in and leaves. When the egg hatches, the larva begins to feed on the spider from the inside, working through it slowly and deliberately while it remains alive. It saves the vital organs for last on purpose because keeping those running keeps the rest fresh. And a fresh food supply is the whole point. For weeks, the spider exists as a living pantry for something that is consuming it in the most efficient order possible. It is, depending on your temperament, either one of the most horrifying things in nature or one of the most coldly brilliant. Probably both. The wasp isn't cruel. Cruelty would require it to care. It's just solved the problem of how to keep meat from spoiling without a refrigerator. And the solution is to never let the meat finish. That's the pain department. The bullet, the burning trail, the devil's horse. Stings and bites built to deliver as much sensation as a small body can produce. The last group on this list doesn't deal in pain at all. Some of them you wouldn't even feel. And that, it turns out, is exactly what makes them the ones to watch. On a vampire bat, most dangerous animals announce themselves. There's a bite, a sting, a jolt, some moment where the body sends up a flare and says, "That just happened." The common vampire bat, Desmodus rotundus, is built around the opposite principle. Its entire success depends on you not noticing it at all. It feeds at night on sleeping animals, birds, tapirs, cattle, and yes, sometimes people. And the whole operation is engineered to happen below the threshold where you'd wake up. It finds its spot using heat. The vampire bat has sensors in its face tuned to pick up the warmth of blood moving close to the surface of the skin, so it can land on a sleeping body and read it like a map, locating the exact place where a vessel runs shallow. Then it goes to work with teeth that are honestly more like surgical instruments than fangs, razor-edged incisors that take a tiny, shallow shaving off the skin, a cut so clean and so small that the sleeper usually feels nothing. It doesn't bite down and hang on like the movies. It opens a little channel and laps. And to keep that channel open, its spit carries a powerful anticoagulant, an enzyme that researchers actually named Draculin, because scientists occasionally have a sense of humor, which keeps the blood from doing the thing blood is supposed to do and clotting the wound shut. So it flows freely the whole time the bat is feeding, and for a while after it leaves. Here's the part that flips the whole thing, though, and it's why this small, almost delicate animal belongs on a list with 5-meter caimans. The blood it takes is trivial. You would never miss it. The danger isn't the meal, it's what the bat can be carrying. The vampire bat is the primary way one particular illness moves through the forest. A disease that, once symptoms set in, is effectively a one-way road if it isn't treated in time. The bite that you slept through, the cut so clean you never felt it, that's the delivery system. An animal that takes almost nothing from you can still leave the most dangerous thing on this entire list behind. And the reason it gets away with it is the same reason it's so unsettling. You were asleep, and it was gentle, and you never knew it was there. It's no surprise that isolated communities tie this animal to the darker spirits of the night, things that slip in while you sleep and quietly draw the life out of you. When attacks cluster, people cover their hammocks in heavy netting and keep lights burning till morning, because the old explanation is that the bat was sent, that someone working against them in the forest aimed it their way. Strip the folklore off and the practical core is exactly right. Cover yourself, keep it out, take it seriously. They arrived at good medicine through a frightening story, which is a pattern this forest repeats over and over. That's a danger that arrives in silence and works slowly. The next one breaks every expectation you have about where it could possibly be, because by every rule you think you know, it cannot be there at all. Bull shark. Forget the rainforest for a second and picture the open ocean, because that's where this animal is supposed to live. The bull shark, Carcharhinus lucus, is a heavy, blunt-nosed, genuinely formidable shark. The kind of thing you brace yourself for at a coastline, not something you'd ever connect to a freshwater river in the middle of a continent. And yet bull sharks have been recorded thousands of kilometers up the Amazon, deep into the interior, about as far from the sea as it's possible to get on that river system. There are records from well inland, in stretches of water surrounded by nothing but jungle for as far as you can travel. A shark in the rainforest. The reason it can do what no other large shark can comes down to a quiet biological trick. The ocean is salt, a river is fresh, and that difference is normally a hard wall for sea animals. Their bodies are tuned to one chemistry and the other one tears them apart from the inside. The bull shark rebuilt its own plumbing to get around it. Its body can adjust how it handles salt on the fly, dialing its internal balance to match wherever it happens to be, so it can swim straight out of the ocean, up the river mouth, and just keep going, through the brackish middle and on into pure fresh water, without missing a beat. It opened a door that's locked for nearly everything else its size, and it walked through into territory no one was guarding, and the place it walked into suits it disturbingly well. Bull sharks favor shallow, murky, low-visibility water, exactly the warm, sediment-heavy, coffee-colored water the Amazon specializes in. That's home field for this animal. It's powerfully built, it's bold, and it tends to investigate first and reconsider later, which is a fine strategy in cloudy water where it can't get a clear look at much anyway. In those conditions, a swimmer is just a shape and a vibration, and the shark closes that distance fast. What makes it land so hard on a list like this is purely the wrongness of it. You can spend a lifetime cataloging the things that might come for you in the Amazon. The caiman, the anaconda, the electric eel, the small fish nobody names out loud, and build a whole mental map of river dangers. A shark is not on that map. It belongs to a different world, an entire ocean away, and through one adjustment of its own chemistry, it put itself thousands of kilometers up a jungle river anyway. Most of this list is about animals doing extreme things in the place they were built for. This one is here for breaking the place rules entirely. So that's the one that shouldn't be able to reach you. We'll end on the one you'd never see. And of everything on this list, it may be the one that asks the least of you to set it off. You don't have to provoke it. You don't have to step on it. You just have to put your hand on the wrong tree. Assassin caterpillar. You won't see this one coming, and that's not a figure of speech. It's the literal problem. The assassin caterpillar, Lonomia obliqua, spends its days pressed flat against the bark of a tree, and it is very good at being bark. The coloring matches. The texture matches. They gather in groups on the trunk and read as nothing more than a slightly rough patch on the wood. There's no bright warning color the way the dart frog gives you, no rearing posture like the spider, no sound. There's a tree and there's your hand reaching out to it, maybe to steady yourself, maybe to push a branch aside, and that's the entire event. What's on the caterpillar's back is a forest of fine, branching spines, and they're not just sharp, they're loaded. Brush against them, even lightly, and they break the skin and deliver a toxin that does something very specific and very hard to undo. It goes after the body's ability to clot. The exact thing the vampire bat's spit does on a tiny local scale, this caterpillar does to the entire body at once and far more aggressively. It strips out the machinery that lets blood seal a wound. And the truly frightening part is the timeline, because nothing dramatic happens at first. There's a burning where you touched it, and then hours pass. You might decide it was nothing. But over the next day, the body's clotting reserves are being quietly used up. And once they're gone, every small vessel that springs a leak has no way to close it. Bruise-colored patches start spreading under the skin. Old wounds reopen. The bleeding moves inward, into the kidneys, into the brain, and a person who felt almost fine the day before is now in a genuine emergency. Sometimes 2 or 3 days after touching a tree they never looked at twice. And here's the turn, because this is exactly the kind of thing the forest does. That same toxin, the one that takes the body's clotting apart so efficiently, is so good at its job that researchers have studied it to build the opposite tool. The very property that makes the caterpillar so dangerous makes its venom a template for medicines designed to dissolve the dangerous clots that threaten heart patients. The thing that empties the blood of its defenses is being reverse-engineered into something that saves the people most at risk of a clot. The forest hands the same molecule to both problems and lets the laboratory decide which way to point it. The local names for it cut straight to the center of what makes it different from everything else we've covered. The thing that burns. The invisible death. Not the strongest, not the fastest, not the biggest, the one you never see. And the older belief tied it to the Kurupira, the forest's guardian, settling accounts with anyone who came in to take and left nothing behind. The cost charged to people who treated the forest as if it were theirs. Every other animal on this list at least gives you something to react to. A shape in the water, a sound in the canopy, a rattle in the leaves, a bright color that says, Stay back. This one gives you a tree that looks exactly like a tree, in a forest made entirely of them. And the only protection is to never put your hand down without looking first. In a place too vast, too crowded, and too patient to ever check all of.